Hey, we're here with Kevin Schroeder, and we're live. What's up, man?
Hello, the internet.
Hello, Internet of Things.
Yes.
Um, Long time no talk, by the way.
Yeah, it's been year and a half, I think.
Really? We did that one video together. Has it really been that long?
I was Magium and I work on it here and there, but I have not worked on that in any significant sense for at least a year.
Yeah.
So
It's-
time
we took it.
flies.
Time does fly. Time does fly. Speaking of time flying, maybe not flying so much that Adobe acquisition came upon us rather quickly, right? Did it because everybody sort of like a lot of people sort of saw it coming, but like some people were like, whoa, that happened a little sooner than I thought it would. Did Was that the case for you or
No, I mean everybody knew that Magento was going to be shopped around to a bunch of different places. So that wasn't necessarily all that surprising. Um, So the fact that it just kind of came out all of a sudden, I was like, hey, wait a second.
right?
Okay. It's a good deal. It sounds like a good deal from what I saw, and it wasn't necessarily surprising that it was Adobe.
Yeah.
Uh, but no, I had no idea that it was specifically coming.
Yeah. I feel like we expected them to sort of ask our permission or something like, hey, Kevin, hey, Ken, like, is this cool? Is this like they just
hey,
announced it? It's like,
hey, hey, Magento community, by the way, we're getting purchased. Yeah.
how do you feel about that? I could imagine that Twitter thread. How would
No,
you
I
feel if
was
we did this?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that would be that would be the worst thing to do, quite honestly. Can you imagine the feedback that you would get? It'd basically be a
Yeah,
bunch of people saying, no, 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 never do it, never do it. Adobe does this, that, whatever, and it's gonna turn to Photoshop or create basically all the stuff that actually happened would have happened and they would have been prepared for it.
right, exactly.
So it's nice, it's a nice idea. It's nice to have, direct community input from a large number of people, but at the end of the day, would that have been beneficial? Probably not. But like I said in the blog post, is that I've done some work with Adobe in the past, and the people that I've worked with there have been really good. And from my perspective, it's actually sounds like a pretty good fit. So I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean you put together this great post on the backstory, and you've worked with the Adobe people in the past and some things like maybe you could give sort of like a quick overview of
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
So the year was 2010, which which was almost a decade ago, which you realize now I'm telling people that I've actually been in the industry for 20 years, which is frightening because I used to make fun of people like that to their faces. But 2010,
You've
I've
been
been working
around.
at I've been around. Yeah, no, I was at Zen at that point for about 3.5, maybe 4 years, give or take. And I just started working as a technology evangelist because I had to leave the services department, which is where I had worked beforehand, um, because my wife and I were looking to adopt. And with the amount of traveling I was doing, I figured I needed to go and do something else. And so I handed in my resignation, and they're like, "Well, is the problem Zen or is the problem your job?" And I said, "The problem is my job. I just simply can't do it. For trying to adopt." And they said, "Well, do you want to work in the marketing department?" I was like, "Well, I've never done that. So sure, why don't we give it a shot?" So I did. And um, as that whole thing kind of transpired, at the time, I guess, I can't remember the exact conversation, but it was something along the lines of Adobe wanting to kind of get into the PHP space a little bit more. And they had a product called Flash Builder. So I take it upon myself to learn a new programming language, had to learn ActionScript, and had to learn what's it called, MXML, I think is what it was called. Um, and had to get to learn kind of how Adobe does things. So I was working in the marketing department and as the technology evangelist, which meant that I had to go and explain to people exactly what it is that Zen's stuff did and what Zen's partnerships did. And the IBM Zen partnership worked out really well for me. I got a couple of books out of the deal, And the Adobe Zend partnership got me in on the Adobe experience, I guess you could say. So I was teaching people who were, ActionScript developers how to use PHP and how to build PHP APIs using the PHP or the Flash Builder for PHP product.
What was that? What was Flash Builder?
Flash Builder was, oh, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but what it was a platform for building basically Java that was built by Adobe, is what you could kind of think of it.
Okay.
Except with an actually usable layout manager, because the stuff that comes with Java is, out of the box at least, pretty difficult to use. But I really liked the layout management with Flash Builder. And I think that's one of the things that was really Adobe's strength, is that they're really a visual company. And so they knew how to build visual stuff, whereas Java is not a visual company, and you can tell by by how
Abundantly clear.
That's exactly right. So that's basically what Flash Builder was using ActionScript, a combination of ActionScript and MXML, to build a combination view and processing layer. And then you needed to talk to a server, and PHP was and is, fairly huge in that space. And so kind of put the two together to make a Flash Builder that worked with PHP for the most part out of the box.
Nice. It's so you mentioned that the Adobe people are kind of more visual creatives. I've been trying to wrap my head around sort of the different departments, product lines of business. Like, because I always think of Adobe as like Photoshop,
right?
All those all those tools for creatives. But then there's this whole Experience Cloud side of things, which, as far as I can, like their whole marketing thing, which competes with Salesforce and stuff, which is like these acquisitions they've made of like Omniture and like ad tracking and all those types of things. And so, and then there's a CMS, I guess they have, that's really good, a content management system. So I'm like, and I've heard those departments are sort of very different from their department is probably the wrong word. But anyway, I'm trying to understand sort of the overall structure of the company. It seems like they've, in recent years, since making all those acquisitions for their whole Experience Cloud, they do a lot more than just, the tools for creatives.
Yeah, they definitely do. And a lot of that has happened since I've worked with them. And I don't know what exactly caused the impetus to move more into the marketing space, possibly because there's this money in that arena, and it's a great way to bring in. I mean, Photoshop is, I've been using Photoshop legally for a very long time, and
illegally for an even longer time.
That's exactly right. No, I have long since put those days behind me. But yes, I mean, they've kind of had this, creative aspect to them since the beginning, as far, at least, from my beginning of even knowing what they did. And a lot of that kind of happened when you hear a lot of things about, trying to get into enterprises and different companies trying to expand into enterprise, because enterprises are very willing to spend money. That's one of the things I loved about the Zend IBM partnership, was that we could go in and we could sell Zend Server, and these guys were like, "What? That's all it costs? Yes, sign me up for 20." And so everybody wants to get, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people want to get in on the enterprise deal. And you got a company like Adobe that's flush with cash, as far as I know. I don't read balance sheets, but as far as I can tell, they have money, they have expertise, they're really good at what they do, and they're really good at building communities of people who use their stuff. And so I don't know exactly what got them into the marketing space, but it seems like a fairly good match, because one of the things that surprised me about getting into Magento. Like I'm a developer, so I don't look at marketing. I don't look at all this kind of stuff. To me, that's what other people do. I make sure sites stay up is what I do. But what's really kind of surprised me as the more I got into e-commerce was how marketing driven the entire process is. And so in some ways, it's actually a fairly good match just from a business perspective that you have a company that's put a lot of money into building marketing expertise and software and services and all that kind of other stuff. And lo and behold, we have another industry here that is highly dependent upon marketing. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, that kind of seems good. I don't know that it's necessarily that, you know, a commerce play is kind of one of the things that I've heard, kind of the connection being made. And that may be the case. I mean, again, I don't know. But because e-commerce is so marketing driven, it almost seems like a bit of a natural connection to make.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, like I'm not a market analyst, so you know,
yeah,
I may be completely wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've heard some people talk about how, you know, for larger enterprises, you know, there's so much in the customer journey that is so content heavy that you've got all these digital assets, you've got all these landing pages and campaigns, and they tie into your ad creative, which ties,
and you got to track all this stuff, which is
kind of track it all. And yeah. And then like by the time they're getting to the sort of the e-commerce, like the add to cart checkout, like that's kind of down the line a little bit. So that that made sense to me. And you know, still trying to kind of understand the overall picture. But apparently you were saying they put on great events too, which is
I was amazed. I mean, when I was at Zend, I went to a lot of different community conferences, and I spoke at IBM, well, not the IBM conferences, but at the Common User Group conference, which was series around built around the iSeries. And I would talk about PHP there, and I talked at OzCon once and things like that. So I was used to going to conferences. I was not prepared for what Adobe Max was like, where you had thousands of people. Oh, you go to, you know, Common was probably one of the bigger ones. You have several hundred people there. ZenCon, you had several hundred, pushing 1,000 maybe. But when I went to Max, I was blown away by all these thousands upon thousands of people who were there. And I forget exactly how this happened. I was in some meeting, so I was late to get to one of the main sessions, and I'm walking up the entryway, and I'm looking up. I can kind of see the screen. I'm like, wait a second, I know who that is on the screen. It's like, no, that can't be William Shatner. And I was thinking to myself, no, wait, we have, okay, Andy Gutman's is, you know, a celebrity of the PHP sort. Everybody kind of knows who he is. You know, same thing with Zev. But going into a room and seeing William Shatner up on a 100-foot screen or a 50-foot screen or something like that, that was quite a bit of a, you're not used to that. You're not used to having like celebrities come in and do this. And what was really funny was I found out afterwards, I was talking with some of the Adobe guys, and apparently Leonard Nimoy was supposed to be coming in and doing it. So all the jokes that they wrote for the script were all for Leonard. And so Shatner was up there and talking, you know, doing the script, and he just all of a sudden goes, you know, this would be a lot funnier if this was Leonard here. So, and what I am told by, again, the Adobe guys is that, or the Adobe folks, is that, you know, there's William Shatner, the character, and there's William Shatner, the person, and they are two completely different people.
Okay.
So it was just kind of neat, you know, to see something like that. The next year I did a couple of tutorials there and a couple of presentations. I totally forget his name. From The Office, the really dorky guy.
Oh, Dwight.
Yes, he was doing it. Well, it wasn't quite as good as Shatner, and in fact, at some point, he turned on his. He must have saw that he was kind of losing the audience, and so he changed his persona into something that was a little bit more to his character. And all of a sudden, they do these things that's called sneaks, where they could see the different features that they're actually working on. It's kind of like a pre-release thing. And so he's talking and he's showing them and he's making comments and he goes, "Oh, look at that hot mama there." And he goes, "Who is she?" And the guy goes, "That's my wife." and I was just like, "Oh."
That's a pretty cool get though. Dwight Schrute at an Adobe conference. It's hysterical.
So there's lots of little stories like that, and it was really cool to go. They have these events that you go to as well. And the last time that I went there, they had Weezer playing, and not just kind of like they rented like a big open air arena, I don't know, maybe half a block or a block away from the center, and they had an open air concert there. And it was just, it's not the kind of thing that I was used to. They really put on a good show. And again, there's a bit of a tie in there with Magento as well, is that Magento has always been one to put on a good show. I mean, even the first Imagine that I went to, which was the first Imagine, or what was it called then? It had a different name.
Was it the one in? I didn't go to the one in San Francisco. It was called. I don't know if it was X Commerce. It was called. I don't know. Who knows?
I don't know. I just remember that. Kind of at the opening night, they had a DJ there and actually DJing stuff. It wasn't just just having a bunch of people sitting around in the in the sponsors area and trying to sell you stuff. They had a DJ there, and it was kind of like a party. And it's like, we really need to do more of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Of course, I was working at Zen at the time, so that didn't happen. But it was an awful lot of fun. And so I think that's one of the things that both Magento and Adobe understand, is that having those kinds of things that are just simply fun to, you're going there for business purposes, but having a way where you can enjoy yourself at these kinds of events, and where they intentionally put on something for your entertainment. There's some value in that, and I think that's both companies understand that, and it makes people happy. It's simple. It's a simple thing that makes people happy, and when people are happy, they're automatically going to associate your brand with their happiness.
Yeah, it's like people give Magento crap for like, are you an events company or a software company, type of thing. But
it's both. I mean, it can be both things. I mean, it's one of the things where you can show your community that you value them in a number of different ways, and one of them is, I mean, programmers, we work our butts off in order to get this stuff out, and having an opportunity to just simply enjoy ourselves it's something that's valuable in my perspective.
Yeah, and like it's people give Magento crap for that, but it is a big part of what creates excitement. I mean, I always walk away from Imagine excited, and I think everybody does, and I think it's an important part of the brand, building the brand and everything behind it. And it's interesting what you're saying about Adobe putting on even better events, because I've heard some people say that like the people in the Adobe community, particularly like the Experience Cloud marketing side, these are marketing agencies, these are design agency designers. And so as these ecosystems are kind of merging, like, a lot of times those marketing companies are the ones with like the dollar, like they have big budgets, big clients, and those are, clients go to them, and then, for whatever they need to do, and then they send the work kind of downstream to the e-commerce, the developers and stuff like that. And so like I guess that's one of the opportunities, is like getting up into that world that's a little more marketing driven.
Yeah, no, I think that it goes both ways. Where I think that I mentioned this earlier too, is that so many e-commerce companies they're not really e-commerce companies, they're actually marketing companies that are they're using their marketing skills to sell you stuff, obviously, because that's what you need at the end of the day. But so much of what they do and so much of what they plan, and it's always astounded me the amount of time and money spent on trying different aspects of bringing people in on your site, which makes sense. It's something that's worth it, but there are so many failed experiments out there just simply as a result of trying to find what is that marketing sweet spot to bring people in on the site. And so, like I said, it seems like a natural fit to me because commerce companies are effectively marketing companies too.
Yeah.
E-commerce companies.
Yeah. And so on the open source side of things, you said, you're optimistic. It does sort of remain to be seen. They're not an open source company in the way that Magento is. And one of the things that, I read a post by the creator of Drupal, his Twitter username is Dries, Dries. And
he spoke at ZenCon a couple of years ago.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how the rumors, which apparently are pretty strong rumors, that Adobe had bid on Demandware, and I think Hybris too, sort of like change. Like, I don't know. To me, that's an interest. If that did happen, then it's like, well, a couple of years ago, they bid on a commerce product that is not at all open source. So, like, that's the one thing that makes me wonder a little bit, like how important the open source component is. But Magento's made some huge strides in regard to really taking open source seriously in the last 2 years. So 2-3 years. So a lot can change in a couple of years. But I don't know.
Well, I think you're exactly right in that Adobe isn't an open source company. I guess they contribute to open source and use a lot of open source themselves. At least that's what it sounded like on a couple of the blog posts that I read. But I think that I mentioned this on Twitter yesterday, was that open source can mean, the benefit of open source can mean different things to different people and can have different values. So as a developer, I like open source because I can take other people's software, use it, contribute back, and generally make the stuff that I make better. As a developer, that's something that has value for me. As a business person, they're going to look at open source as a way of getting into a market that might take a lot of money to get into. As a marketer, open source, it's a buzzword, and it's useful.
It's like a marketing channel in a way.
Yeah. And so when you look at the Magento ecosystem as a whole, the Magento software itself is good. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a valuable thing. But what I think is truly valuable about Magento is the nature of the ecosystem that you have around it. And that ecosystem is effectively people. And so when you're looking at an open source, from an open source perspective, it's not your software licensing that determines whether or not something is open source. That's a component of it, but that's not all that it is. It's, I think, more driven by the type of people that you have involved in it. Open source people will not just go and, oh, hey, I'm just going to commit source code to something that I don't care about. I don't. I commit to stuff that I can help in some way, that I know in some way, and I'm trying to solve a problem that I have, and somebody else might have a benefit or gain a benefit from it as well. And so open source doesn't necessarily, like I said, doesn't necessarily mean source code per se, because what you're really doing is you're interacting with people of a certain mindset, and those people, I think, are valuable from a business perspective. Never mind the philosophical side of it, where all people have value. From a business perspective, you have a large group of people who are committed to the software, and it'd be ridiculous for any company to spend that kind of money on Magento only to throw out 90% of the people who are passionate about it. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that?
Yeah. I don't know if it was you that said this in on Twitter in the article, but basically the point you're making now is like, even though they're not an open source community, like the analogy to, you know, people that do open source are passionate about what they do, and Adobe users are passionate about their products. So there's that. There's that kind of connection. It's like there's a similar type, you know, personality or a similar sort of underlying drive to the communities, even though one's open source, one isn't.
Right. And what I think it really comes down to is pride in what you do.
Right. Yeah. Craftsmanship.
Yeah, exactly.
You also had an interesting point about open source monetization. You were sort of saying like you're interested to see kind of how they'll monetize, like beyond just, you know, the kind of the standard thing, licenses and stuff, the cloud and stuff like that.
Right.
What are you thinking there?
Well, this is something that it's kind of been something I've seen in a lot of different open source companies. If you go back to my time at Zend, we had, I think his name was Chris Anderson. He wrote a book called The Long Tail. He was one of the keynote speakers there, and everybody got a copy of it. And I was like, great, got free stuff. I might as well read it because it's free. Free as in beer too, so that's even better. So I read through it, and what he basically had looked at was what Netflix's revenue, or how money moves around in the company based off of who's watching what. And so you have, you know, the big blockbusters that everybody's watching. Everybody's watching Star Wars, or everybody's watching, oh goodness, now it would have to be Trolls because I have young children or something like that. but you have, these are the Elsa, what was that?
Frozen. Yeah.
So these are the big ones that everybody wants to have, these huge money makers, you know, where they spend $300 million to make the movie and they come back with $1 billion, or something along those lines. But I'm going to get the numbers wrong, and I'd have to look at the book. I have to pull it off my shelf, which we don't have time for me to go look for it. But it was something along the lines of 60 to 80% of Netflix's traffic were on non-big budget, small feature kind of things. And I think that his thesis was along the lines of, as your cost of distribution approaches zero, you have a longer tail of smaller pieces of revenue that, as a whole, actually add up to a significant portion. I think it was something like half or 60% or something like that. The revenue that Netflix was generating from that was based off of these small release entertainment shows that nobody ever heard of it. But, you know, you'd have 1,000 here, 2,000 views there, 5,000 or 10,000 views. But that all adds up. And one of the things that's, and I don't know the answer to this. If I did, I'd probably be doing something different. That when we're talking about the open source side of things, there's usually some kind of a community edition and then some kind of a for-pay edition that you end up utilizing. And it's always seemed to me, the community edition is always going to be the one where you have the most number of eyes on. And it's always seemed to me that even if you could get people to be paying customers in those free editions, and that paying amount could be $5 a month, could be $1 a month, or $10 a month, or something small like that, that the ease of conversion from a $10 a month to $1,000 a month customer is smaller than the difference between a $10 a month customer and a $1,000 a month customer is smaller than a completely free customer and the $10 customer. Because once people are sending you money and they've committed to what it is that you're doing, and presumably they're making money off of it as well in some way. They have a vested interest at that point. And I've always wanted to see a company build out some mechanism, some ecosystem, something where you could have a long tail of software-based ingenuity that you may not have, a big company come in, or you may have a big company come in and have 1,000, 10,000, or 100,000 clients on it, but providing a means for somebody to have 50 or 100 clients, but be a smaller person who maybe doesn't do the same level of stuff as these larger organizations do. To me, I see that as opportunity. It's that it's like the Flappy Bird of of e-commerce. Give people an opportunity to easily make a little bit of money and consistent money, and help them integrate with the customers that you have. I don't know. I might just be, this might just be a pipe dream, and maybe there's not a solution to it.
So kind of the idea being like, if open source users paid, $5 a month, $10, or some small number.
Well, not that they would pay. I think that that's the wrong way of looking at it. That there is something of value that you could give that they would be willing to part with $5 or $10 a month.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's a little bit of a different way of wording it in that, or phrasing that, in that still give it away for free and do the proper open source thing, but provide a means. When I was back at Zend, this was my phrase that I always wanted to, I should have trademarked it or something, but have customers lovingly locked in, that they committed to your product and to your brand and things like that, but they did so because they wanted to. And Magento is really good about that, because you have thousands upon thousands of developers who are building out e-commerce sites on Magento, but how many of them, what would a revenue stream look like if you could provide something to entice them to $5 a site, $10 a site per month, or something along those lines?
Yeah,
I don't know. To me, it seems like there's a potential long tail opportunity there.
Yeah, I gotcha. It's interesting too, because, and I know you got to go, so we'll wrap it up here. Because
Okay.
Adobe,
the kids are quiet right now, so.
Oh, okay. Because Adobe has their Creative Cloud, which is, I don't know what the pricing is, but I'm assuming it's somewhere in the $50, $60 a month, less than 100, or it's in that. So if they created a price point somewhere, they have experience monetizing around those types of price points.
Yeah,
so
they
who
do.
knows,
Yeah. No, and also I think that one of the things I think that they have too is they have the working capital to make a go at something along these lines. Maybe even take a little bit of a risk. I don't know. And you've got a ton of creative people. And my experience with the Adobe management, which is this much experience with them, is that they were always willing to, at a minimum, listen for a good idea. And that's screensaver just hit.
I know, I could tell you went dark on me.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that impressed me. They may say no 100 times, but they seem genuinely interested in hearing new ideas, and if the right idea came along, they seemed like the kind of people, and again, this was 7, 8 years ago, but they seemed like the kind of people who took that kind of stuff seriously. And I think that was a tremendous benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think there was even I'd have to go into my email archive, and I don't even know if I have these archived anymore, because they're technically not my property. But conversations that I had about how Flash Builder should work with PHP. Mm-hmm. And I want to say, and I might be wrong about this, but I want to say that there may have even been some minor changes put into the product, because I said, this is this may be how you do things in ActionScript or whatever. But this is how we do things in PHP, and this is how people are used to doing it. So if you want to kind of merge the two together, this is something that would make things easier for someone coming from a PHP background to use this. And if I remember correctly, I think there was a couple of little things that actually got put into the product as a result.
Nice.
So they often seemed really open to good ideas.
Nice, man. Well, good to see some positivity overall.
Yeah.
I'm feeling. I think initially I reacted somewhat negatively, and I'm starting to get kind of pumped about it actually.
No, I think that, yeah, I mean, the original eBay thing that happened, I think that there's some bad taste left from the eBay thing. Okay, so hyperbole perhaps. And so, yeah, I think there's some reasonable, there's a concern over that, to put it that way, I guess. Because I think that the sense was that eBay didn't really know what they had with Magento, and what they had was the Magento community. I mean, again, there's Magento the software, which is one thing, and then you have Magento the community, which is where I think the true value lies. And I don't know that eBay ever really knew what they had there, but like I said, my experience with Adobe was that they are very much customer driven, and they understand how to work with paying customers. And so I think that bodes well. Again, with the standard caveat, this has been a while, and I'm a little bit removed from a lot of this, but that I think is a big difference between the original eBay acquisition and then the current Adobe one.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's cool to get different people's takes on it. You've had some overlap with the Adobe community. It's going to be interesting to see how the communities kind of intertwine and things like that. So I thought that'd be cool to get your take on it. And
yeah, I don't know they'll necessarily intertwine. I mean, I'm sure there will be overlap somewhere, but I don't know that they necessarily need to intertwine in order to be successful. I think that you're working towards a common goal, but you're doing it with different skill sets and with different types of people. And if you intertwine them too much, you may end up having something you don't want to have. But no, I am optimistic. I've had great experiences with Magento. I've had great experiences with Adobe. And I think it's exciting.
Yeah. Well, like in terms of the intertwining, even just something as simple as what the events, like, you were saying, just wait till Adobe's throwing this event. Like when Adobe is throwing the event, like, it's probably an Adobe event, and there's probably some people, they're probably starting to merge things together a little bit, even just in terms of who's at the conference, and then, you're making connections with other people at the conference. And
yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised, if when you're having a Magento, the next big Magento event or whatever it is, where you're going to have a huge influx of Adobe people. And I think maybe the open source people are going to be looking at this and going, one of two things. One of them is going to be, oh, I don't like this, which is one option. And then the other one is going to be, holy crap, I had no idea you could do all this.
Yeah. So I think and I think that's like actually is such a concise way of putting this whole thing. Is there's those two ways to look at it, like, oh, it's bad, or like look at all, like look at the opportunity here, look at this whole new pool of people that we get to interact with, and opportunities for different types of projects and different types of clients and different scale of a client and things like that. So
just don't do anything. Just don't do anything that competes with Adobe now.
Right. Well, then the Acquia thing, I think Drupal's CMS deal, I think Magento has had, and I got to learn more about these because I don't know too much about them, but I think Magento's had a partnership with them, but this is probably gonna gonna cut in on that partnership a tiny bit, because I
It
think
may.
they compete somewhat directly. And of course, the Drupal guy was the one that wrote that blog, somewhat of a scathing blog post.
Right. Well, if that's scathing, then we're probably on pretty good ground here. I mean, I've read blog posts that are a lot worse than that. Not necessarily about the Adobe Magento thing, but if that's scathing, I think that we're okay.
We're okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, dude, good to catch up, man. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Anything you want to point people to? Anything you're working on?
Oh goodness. There are a few things that I'm working on. I have no idea if or when I'm going to be releasing them. One of them is actually a load testing data collection and graphing service. I've been using it for a couple of clients for load testing that I've been doing it on, and I really like it, actually. That was one thing. And there was another thing that I wanted to try that I haven't quite started yet, but might see something over the next couple of months, where I want to do kind of a combination hybrid self-hosted cloud Selenium-based monitoring system that people could use. And a lot of the stuff that I want to do is, I'm one guy. I don't want to be spending a ton of time in building up massive infrastructures, but trying to build out low cost opportunities for people to do a lot of the stuff that a lot of the big guys do. And so, there's a lot of really good, top-notch load testing services out there. But once you start putting in, the dollars per month, it's not worth it to a lot of companies to do that consistently. So that's what I'm doing here. It's basically a data store that you can graph out and find correlations between load test results and instrumentation data. And then this other one, again, would be something to be a low-cost thing for people who just want to have some basic browser-based functional testing on live websites. It can be as simple or as complex as you want, but a hybrid approach so that you don't have a large cost outlay. That's kind of the things that I'm working on right now.
Nice, man. You can't stay away from that Selenium stuff, dude.
Yeah. I don't know that it's my jam necessarily. It's just
it's your jam.
I've been in the Magento community now for, depending on how you measure it, significantly for 5 years now. And it's not utilized. I don't think that Selenium and browser testing, even just from a functional perspective, but also just all across, the deployment landscape. I think there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of left out there because people don't know how to use it. Mm-hmm. And so it's just something that I think there's a lot of benefit for. The big people, again, this is I'm always kind of going after the little guy. The big people know how to use it. You've got a lot of people who know their stuff and know better than I do. And I always like being that bridge between the person who doesn't have that level of experience, but doesn't have any experience, but they can't commit to having, this kind of experience. And I like kind of being that guy in the middle. Mm-hmm. And so that's why the load testing thing I'm working on is kind of modeled around that. And hopefully the Selenium monitoring thing is modeled around that. We'll see if it works. I haven't been particularly good at fitting that middle mold yet, but I think there's benefit there. I think there's opportunities. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, no, so it's funny sometimes with building products and services and stuff like that, you kind of attack something from one angle and then you come back to it in a different incarnation in the future. And it's funny because
I built something for Magium. For those who don't know, Magium is a Selenium-based testing framework I built. That it'll basically figure out how to navigate your website. And so you run a program, it writes out a Selenium script for you, and you can click all the way through your website. Mm-hmm. You can't do that with checkout because that's a little bit more complicated. But it would figure out how to navigate navigation menus and things like that. And I also built a module for Magento 1, never got around to Magento 2, where you could actually do Selenium tests as soon as you click save on an individual product, and just to make sure that the site or that the page wasn't going to break necessarily when if you did something wrong in it. So yeah, I do a lot of little stuff like that.
Yeah. That's cool, man. Well, hey, thanks for popping on, and get ready to close this sucker out.
All right.
Thanks everybody for checking this out, and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and we'll see you next time.